Okay, so this is Substance Designer, and what we're going to be making is a leaf material. This program is really interesting. It's node-based, non-destructive, and it's what environment designers are using to create materials for video games. So I'd like to give a little bit of an introduction to it. It creates some really interesting effects as well. You can see here, this is what our material will eventually look like with your color, of course. And it's a really powerful program. So let's just get a general overview of what we're going to be doing, and then I'll show you how to do it. So first of all, our model or our materials, the 3D view is on the left here. The output or the texture maps that we're using at any given time will be on the right here. Our files or our substance materials will come in on the Explorer. We have a library of functions and different graph items that we can use over here. And then our properties panel is on the right. My biggest complaint about Substance Painter is that these little nodes are going to be absolutely tiny, so they are hard to see, but I'll try and let you know what each of these are. What we're going to be creating today is a map that consists of a base color, so just like we've been doing, base color. And if you hold down Command and use your middle mouse button to click and drag, you can get this hand icon. Alt and the left mouse button is how you move around, just like in Maya. But it's this, actually the middle mouse button just lets you move up and down. So we're also, we're going to be creating a few different maps today. We're creating our base color. We're creating our normal map, just like normal. We're creating a roughness map. And then we have our ambient occlusion from our previous model, but we could plug that in here. And we also have the height map that we saved from Substance Painter. So we're going to be using a couple of different blends. So this is our color map, our color ID map. We're going to blend it with a levels and a grayscale conversion. And then from there, we're going to add a gradient map. This is where we're adding our color. So in here, we can say the color of our leaves and then also the color of our branches in one gradient map. And that will output to our base color. For our normals, we're just going to use our normal map and output it to our normals. And then for our roughness, we're going to use the levels that we created or the colors that we created and a blend node. And then that will enable our branches to be kind of more matte and our leaves to be a little more shiny. All right, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to close this, or no, let's do a new file, new, and substance graph. For this substance graph, let's call this my branches. For our size, so our initial working resolution, I'd like 2048 by 2048. Output format is relative to the parent, and create graph in a new package. You could also create like one giant package with multiple materials, but we're not going to worry about that right now. For templates, let's select metallic roughness and hit OK. Cool. So you can see on the left here is my kind of a preview of what my material looks like, which is just a regular old cylinder, but I could change this so that I'm looking at a cube under scene or looking at a plane. To start, let's just look at a cube, or you can look at a rounded cube. How about that? Okay, so let's just look at the difference, and remember you can use click and drag your middle mouse button to zoom in. So now let's look at these little nodes that we have. First is our base color. The second one is our normal map. So we already have a normal map. So let's go grab the resources that we already created. So I'm going to right click on on the unsaved package here. Right click there, import bitmap. And from here I can grab the color map and the normal map. So let's grab my color map and then right click, import bitmap. And I'm also going to include my ambient occlusion. And if I command and click, I can grab my normal map. And I already have my color map. There we go. And hit open. So these will be stored under your resources. Now I can click and drag my normal map into my scene and go from this little output node. So click on that, and I'm just going to drag it all the way over to my normal map. And you'll see that it makes some nice connections for you. So instantly in my 3D cube down here, I get kind of a scary looking, but that's okay, cube with my textures on it. Now I can also scroll down here to my ambient occlusion. Let's click and drag this guy, drop it, and click from output and go all the way to the ambient occlusion. And you can see I'm already getting some nice light and some nice shadows, and that looks really nice because I had all that weird texture in here. Cool. Last one that I can add, I could add my height map. I don't know if I saved that one. I don't think I did actually. That's okay. Let's go back to our base color and let's get started adding that. This will be our first kind of actual nodes. So let's grab this color map and I'm going to click it in here. Now this is like a uniform color. If I wanted to just change the color overall of my material, I could do that here. But I don't want that because that would make my branches and my leaves the same color. So I'm just going to delete that. All right, instead let's grab this color map. I can click on it and just kind of move it over. Now the first thing I want to do is add a level. So I'm going to press space bar and let's add a levels. And I'm going to click from this output into my levels map. And then I also need to add a grayscale map. So let's right click, or sorry, spacebar gradient map. No, grayscale conversion, sorry. Grayscale conversion. There we go. So for our levels, it's hard to see here because I'm not getting much output. But basically what the levels does is say, I'm going to input a black color. So my scale is from black to white. And my output will be from black to white. Now I could reverse these by clicking my white all the way to the left and my black all the way to the right. So let's give that a try. And then we're going to click and drag to our grayscale conversion. So you can see that basically it just reversed everything. So what's black is black and white is white. And now we have our grayscale conversion. And that's just saying if these values from our color map had any kind of color at all, change that to black and white. Next, I'm going to add a gradient map. So that's just saying to add color on my leaves and add a different color on my branches. So let's press spacebar again and call this gradient map and click. And I'm going to take my input from my grayscale conversion, and then I'm actually going to output this all the way to my base color. So now for my gradient map, if I click on it, I can see some of my parameters on the right here. So the main one that you want to look at is your specific parameters and your gradient. So I'm just going to click on my gradient, and you can see I have like a gradient from black to white. If I want to click on the colors or edit this, I need to click on one of these tiny little dots at the bottom. Now what I want to do is select a color here for my my leaves and a color for my branches. So on one side it will be my branch color, and the other side will be my leaf color. It's a little terrifying right now, but that's okay. Keep going. So for my branch color, I want probably like a medium brown. So let's try and find something that works for that. If you have the birch tree, you can do something kind of a browny gray. That looks really nice, or even like a silvery gray. That can look nice. But I'm going to go with a medium brown. And then for the other side of the equation is my red leaves. So I can grab a nice, interesting red color. Now I also have other little dots that if I click anywhere on my gradient, it's going to add more dots to it. So here's where I could add some kind of different shades of orange or brown to try and add a little bit of variation in here. And depending on your model, and if you are all black and all white, it will be, you know, very, either where it's black, it will be one color, where it's white, it'll be the other. But if you do have some grayscale in your image, you'll get some color variation that's really interesting. So feel free to play around with that. All right, so now that I've got that, I'm going to close this window, and you can see here that I've got a tree, and this tree has color on it. I've got color on my branches, and we're in good shape, and we have some highlights, and we also have some ambient occlusion already attached. Okay, so now we need to add an opacity mask, because right now we're seeing all of the weird edges on our leaves. So if I go to my unsaved package here, right click and link 3D scene, I can actually bring in my tree branches and my tree card, and then I'm going to bake the opacity map for it in Substance Painter, Substance Designer. So let's do that. And you'll see that baking in Substance Designer is very similar to baking in Substance Painter. All right, do you want to use it as a UDIM mesh? Let's say no. And basically we're going to go down to our tree card model, right click, and let's bake some model information. And we're just trying to bake this opacity map. So the first thing you're going to see, even though the layout is slightly different, it is very similar to Substance Painter. So we're going to add a high definition model, and if you click from resources, since we already brought in our tree branches high, I'm just going to say OK. For our bakers, our baker default value, we can say 2048. Default format is PNG, or we could use Targa here. Default anti-aliasing, I'm going to crank mine up to 8x8. And then we need to add a baker. So for add a baker, we just need an opacity map from our mesh. But you can see we could also do an ambient occlusion or curvature, normal, anything that we like, a position. But let's grab an opacity one, and then let's say start render instead of baking. Okay, so once I finished baking, I realized that hardly any of my leaves are showing up here. Now, the reason for that is my frontal distance and my rear value are both too small. So remember that I did have very deep leaves. So I'm going to crank these up. I believe I'm going to put it at 0.1 and start my render again and see if that does better. And yes, it does. I believe you can also type in values. I think my original was like 0.3. Let's see if that makes a difference. No. Okay, I'm just going to stick with like 0.1. There we go. Okay, now once it's done, we're just going to close this and drag our tree opacity card onto our scene here. And use that middle mouse button to drag around. Now, right now it does not have an output and it's not applied to our scene. To apply it to our scene, you can either drag it from the right here onto your model, or you can right click it here and drag it to this area. When you drop it, it's going to give you a bunch of options like what is this map, and I'm just going to tell it it is an opacity map. There you go. So now if you look, we've got this really nicely baked opacity map, and it's making the outline of our leaves look really great here. Okay. So the problem with this is we don't have an output just yet. So right now, if we tried to output to Maya, this would not show up. So I'm just going to add an output. So let's press spacebar and check for an output node. And these right here, the normals and the base color, are what we call output maps. And they have a group of material, label, base color, and identifier base color. So let's do a group of material on our opacity. Label it opacity. Oops. T. And the identifier will be opacity. And then we're just going to connect that. Cool. All right. So the last thing is levels. If you are tired and want to move on, you can just fast forward this part. But I'm just going to add a real quick levels or roughness map. So right now for roughness, if we click on that map, right now a uniform color is inputting to it. So it's like a mid-range gray, so it has like a little bit of roughness, a little bit of shininess. If I change this mid-range gray to completely white, that would mean that our leaves are completely rough, have no shininess to them. I could also change this to completely black, and then they would have a lot of shininess to them. Now, what if I want my branches to be rough and my leaves to be shiny? Let's try to figure that out. So we already have this grayscale conversion, and that will allow us to where our leaves are one color and our branches are the other. So let's create a levels. So spacebar and get your levels. And we're going to go from our grayscale conversion into our levels. And now if we just plug this into our roughness, that would work where right now our colors are kind of reversed where, actually no, they're correct. So right now we have 100% shininess on our leaves because they're black. And then we have 100% matte on our branches. Now, what if I want this to be a little somewhere in between with the leaves? I can add what's called a blend node. So I'm just going to press spacebar and grab a blend node. And so for the levels, we're going to input to the foreground of our blend node. And then we're going to take this uniform color and we're going to input it into the background, and then take this and input it into our roughness map. There we go. All right, so we go from our levels, and then here's our blend. Now, right now, this uniform color is set to black, but I'm going to change it to somewhere in between. And now if we go to our blend, it's going to take this value and change it depending on the opacity of the blend. So you can see that just by changing this opacity, I'm getting like different shades of gray here. So I want somewhere a little in between. So what this is saying is make the branches a little more shiny and take the leaves from 100% shiny to somewhere in between. All right, so that's our roughness map. Okay, so now we're ready to export to Maya. So we can go to my branches, right click, and let's export our outputs as bitmaps. All right, this is very similar. We're going to do destination, so where do you want to save? And I'm going to go to my source images folder. I'm going to create a new folder, and let's call this final tree canopy. This is my second time. And hit open. And that's where I'm going to export everything. For my format, I'm going to use Targa. That's a really nice high quality image format, or I could also use PNG or JPEG. And then here are my outputs. So I would like to export my base color. We can do our normal map from here. Our roughness we just worked on. We didn't do metallic, so I can unclick that. My height map is actually not doing anything, so I can just hide that. But I will export the ambient occlusion and the opacity map. And just keep these color spaces. And now let's export outputs. And it says export done down below. All right, so we are all set. Let's go back into Maya and connect these up. All right, so now we are back in Maya, and our last step is to attach the textures that we just created onto our plane. So I'm going to actually duplicate this plane. So Command D and move this plane off so we can see what we're doing here. And I'm going to right click and assign a new material. Let's go with a blend. It is a little easier to hook up, but you absolutely could use a AI standard surface as well. So I'm going to call this Final Tree Canopy. So now we're going to actually use the nodes. So those are those little checkerboard boxes here to attach the different maps that we created. So for color, let's grab our little checkerboard and select File. And this will come up with this file attributes. So for image name, click on the little folder there. Let's going to find our Final Tree Canopy. And for this one, I'm going to attach my base color, which is my Targa. Now, if nothing is happening in your main scene, remember that you need to turn on textured, which is this little checkerboard image here. All right. So color space is fine, sRGB. So now I'm going to click back on my plane and let's attach our transparency map. So let's grab that and click on File. And now we're going to attach our opacity map. Hit OK. And you can see that this is starting to come into view now. Click on my plane again. For bump mapping, I'm going to click on that. Go to File. And it's really important to say use as tangent space normals. And then click on this tab File 3 and the little file folder. And then here we're going to grab our normal map. Now you can see we're getting some really nice depth. I could possibly use the normal map I created from Substance Painter just because I feel like I'm losing a little bit of the detail out here. That's okay. All right, so click on this guy again to bring back our blend options. And the last thing we need to add is our ambient occlusion. So ambient color, let's click on that guy and go to File, click on Image Name, and let's grab our ambient occlusion. You can see all that nice shadow information here. Whew. And that made it really pop. Cool. So again, I did lose a little bit of, I think, some of my baking information. But that's okay. We can fix that. All right. So then last thing, I could also, actually, I don't, let's see where I would add my roughness. I think that would be under specular color. Let's try and add that there. File, click on the image name, and let's grab our roughness map and hit open. There you go. And now that just added a little less shine to all of our different colors. All right, great. So now you can move on to our last tutorial, which is how to actually apply these to your tree.